I would like to begin by acknowledging that today I am coming to you from the lands of the Ngunnawal people in our nation's capital, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that to the traditional custodians of the lands from which you are meeting with us today. A special welcome to, we have a number of elected members with us today, so welcome to Mayor Wayne Thorley from rural City of Murray Bridge, Councillor Stephen Cooman from City of Casey, Councillor Kim Ross, also from City of Casey, and Mayor Ruth Butterfield from Armidale in WA, and an apology from our Chair, Mayor Teresa Lyons, who has been called out to a community a community need and so she sends her apologies that she can't be here with us today, but rest assured she was here in Canberra fighting the good fight last week, and we'll fill you in on that in just a little while. So today we've got a special treat for you. So first off, we're going to hear from the team at the Centre for Population in Treasury, and they're going to run through the latest population statement, which was a really important document for us as advocates. And it's a very important document for the Commonwealth because it does provide a lot of information on how policies are developed and programs are planned and funded based on demography and population. So without further ado, I'm going to ask Michelle Jack, our National Communications Lead, in brackets, not for much longer, but more on that later, to introduce our friends from the Centre for Population.
Thanks so much, Bron. Yes, so thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon or this morning. I'd like to extend my thanks to the Centre for Population for attending today and to give us an overview of the 2025 population statement. So I would like to acknowledge that online we have Yiyong Kai, Emily Woodthorpe, Elijah Powell, Chelsea Boone and Ashley Kidd. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. We have some slides we'll share in a second, but yeah, thank you very much for having us. We're really excited to be here and give you an overview about who the Centre for Population is and what we do. Today, myself, Emily and Elijah will present some insights from the population statement, and then we can open for questions. We might leave questions until the end, but definitely if you're thinking of anything, feel free to pop it in the chat, and yeah, happy to answer questions afterwards. So if we move to what we do at the Centre for Population, so we were established in 2019 to understand how Australia's population is changing and the implications of these changes. So we action this through three core objectives, which is engage and collaborate, enrich the evidence base, and inform policy. And we have three teams that cover forecasting, research, engagement, and policy advice. We produce two key products. Firstly, the intergenerational report, which is published at least once every 5 years, and that can be found on the Treasury website, and also our annual population statement, which is what we'll be talking about today. You can find these on our website, population.gov.au, population statement, and we also publish some products that go along with that, including dashboards and other insights. So definitely recommend having a look at that. We'll now move on. I'll now pass over to Emily to talk about, start talking about some insights from the statement.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. So I'd just like to begin this presentation with the acknowledgement that the 2026-27 federal budget was released last week, and that while the trends may still be the same, some of the absolute numbers may be slightly different in light of more recent forecasting. So for the first time in the 2025 population statement, it features experimental 40-year projections at a state and sub-state level, which is a new capability for the centre. These projections provide key insights into how areas will grow and age over time. So this slide shows 5 major population stories to watch over a 40-year horizon. So Australia's total population is going to continue to grow, reaching 41 million in 2065. However, population growth is expected to slow to 1.3% in 2025-26 and 0.7% in 2065-66, driven by slower net overseas migration and a long-term decline in the total fertility rate. Net overseas migration is also slowing down and is well below its peak at 556,000 in the year to the September quarter 2023. This is largely due to fewer temporary migrant arrivals, and long-term net overseas migration is assumed to be 235,000 per year. As you would expect, most of the net overseas migration will continue to go to capital cities. Natural increase, which is births less deaths, is expected to continue to fall in 2025-26, but in 2031-32, natural increase is expected to recover as the total fertility rate recovers, driven by the recuperation of births. Natural increase will then slowly trend downwards as population aging results in higher mortality, and the total fertility rate remains at the assumed long-term rate of 1.62 children per woman. Life expectancy will also continue to rise, so Australians' median population will steadily rise, reaching 43.7 years in 2065-66. However, Australia's working age population is expected to continue to grow by 0.8% per year on average. In comparison, about 80% of OECD countries are expected to have declining working age populations by the mid-2060s. Okay, so population growth varies across Australia, but it is slowing almost everywhere. As you can see on the map, the rate of population growth is expected to fall over the next 40 years in almost every part of Australia, with those areas with negative growth shown in red. Over the 40-year projection period to 2065-66, the 4 fastest growing states will be Victoria, Queensland, Western Australia and the ACT, each averaging 1.1% growth annually, while Tasmania will be the slowest growing state at 0.1% average growth. Tasmania is also projected to be the first state to have deaths outnumber births, and this is expected to occur from 2028-29 onwards. And South Australia is expected to follow Tasmania and experience this by the 2060s. Contributing to Australia's population, slowing population is Australia's population story. So Australia's TFR has been below the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman for almost 50 years. The TFR is expected to fall to a record low of 1.42 in 2025-26. The TFR is then projected to gradually return to and stabilise at the centre's long-run projection of 1.62 in 2031-32. Please note that the Treasury has revised this fertility rate in the 2026-27 budget, and that we are now forecasting the TFR to peak at 1.5 in 2031, before gradually beginning a decline. Currently, we only have fertility projections to 2036-37. However, long-term forecasts will be produced in the upcoming intergenerational report. So in Australia, 2-child families remain the most common. While most women still have at least 1 child, far fewer are going on to have 3 or more. These charts compare births by parity, and the decline in Australia's total fertility rate has been driven by lower fertility rates among women aged under 30. Parenthood is being delayed, and this is not fully offset by higher fertility rates at older ages. There has also been a gradual decline in fertility intentions in Australia since 2001, but they do remain above the total fertility rate. Looking deeper at what is driving this, changing family sizes is playing a very important role. Broadly speaking, families are getting smaller and women are getting older at their first age of birth. These graphs show the major story driving change in Australian families, that of recuperation, which is when there's an increase in births at older ages, which partially or fully compensate for the delay in childbearing at younger ages. As you can see, the number of first children born per woman in 1992-93 and 2021-22 are roughly the same, but with the births in 2021-22, they're happening later in the mothers' lives. And then for the second and particularly the third and higher order births, women are reaching these birth milestones later in their life, meaning that births are often partially recuperated. At an aggregate level, this means that there are fewer third children being born, and this partial recuperation could be the result of changing personal preferences or reflect age-related fertility challenges. However, it also has to be acknowledged that the total fertility rates vary across Australia. This map demonstrates the TFR for 2024-25 in Australia's capital cities and rest of state areas. While capital cities are expected to grow faster and age slower than rest of state areas, the TFR in rest of state areas is higher than it is in the capitals of all states and territories. The rest of New South Wales had the highest TFR in the country, at 1.7 children per woman in 2024-25, while the ACT had the lowest TFR of capital cities and rest of state areas at 1.27 children per woman. Australia remains younger than many similar economies, but our population does continue to age due to lower fertility rates and higher life expectancy. Changes in the age structures seen in these charts illustrate these trends. Between 2005 and 2065-66, the population share of 0 to 20-year-old age group is declining. In part, this is due to a decline in the total fertility rate, and this age group is projected to grow by 56% across the 60-year period. By comparison, the size of the population aged 65 years and over is projected to grow by 264%. The population aged 85 years and over is projected to grow by 506% during the same period. This means that by 2065-66, there will be 1.9 million people aged 85 years and over, which is more than triple the number today. Aging varies between states and territories. In 2021-22, the gap between the youngest median age, which would be the Northern Territory at 33.4 years, and the oldest median age, which would be Tasmania at 4.7 years, was 8.2 years. So this gap is projected to widen to 10.3 years by 2035-36. This chart shows how we expect each state and territory's old age dependency ratio, which is the number of people aged 65 years and over per 100 people of working age, to change over the next 40 years. As you can see, every state and territory will see this ratio rise at different rates. This reflects the national challenge of increasing fiscal burden for caring for the elderly. It is worth saying, however, that this measure does not perfectly reflect the fiscal burden of aging, with the age at which people retire and the labour force participation of those over 65 both also rising. So by 2065-66, the labour force may look quite different. When we compare ageing between capital cities and rest of state areas, by 2035-36, around 24% of the population outside capital cities is expected to be 65 years and over, with just 17% within capital cities. So the divergences in ageing across states are also visible in states and territories' evolving age structures over the next 40 years. The chart at the top shows the age structure of the biggest states in 2023-24 and 2065-66 as compared to the national average in the blue line. As you can see, these lines are very clustered, with the biggest states all being very similar age structures to each other and to the national structure, given the national structure is predominantly comprised of these states. By 2065-66, these states will have older age structures, with the peak in the 30s and 40s no longer visible in the age structure, and a far greater proportion of populations aged 65 years and over. The charts on the bottom show a much more varied story of the smaller states and territories. The ACT and NT, currently young, will age, but will have significantly younger age profiles than the national structure by 2065-66. South Australia, and in particular Tasmania by contrast, will continue to age, becoming increasingly older than the national age structure. So I'm now going to hand over to Elijah from our modelling and forecasting team to talk through some of these trends that are occurring below the state level.
Thanks, Em. So, yep, I'm just going to talk about capital cities and the rest of state areas and the interstate migration and things that are driving their growth. So, capital cities grow much faster because they get most of migration. You can see with these charts. So that's a bar chart showing the cumulative contribution to population growth between 2024, 25, all the way till 2035 to 36. So it's what we expect of our population the next decade. These include net overseas migration, natural increase, and net interstate migration. So as Emily just explained the aging trajectories of South Australia and Tasmania, and that's because that they are growing at a much lower rate. Then they're not growing fast enough to keep their populations young compared to the other states. You see that there is a clear distinction between population growth in the capital cities and the rest of states. The majority of this growth is driven by not overseas migration, which we forecast over the next decade to contribute over 70% of population growth. Over 80% of these migrants are expected to go to capital cities, which is why they grow so quickly. And among all the migrants that come to Australia, almost 60% of them move to Sydney and Melbourne. And this is largely just because Sydney and Melbourne have some of the biggest educational institutions and where we have our largest labour markets. I do note that you see net overseas migration is positive for all regions. So where we do see the difference in population growth in these areas is net interstate migration. And this is where you have residents moving from one geography to another. And you see that there is a clear outflow of NIM out of the capital cities into the rest of state areas. And this is important for these regional areas because they don't get a lot of growth at all. While they do rely on some non, but they also rely heavily on NIM. So to help us actually understand the driver of these flows, we should probably look at the age structure of interstate migration. So this is a chart showing net interstate migration by age between 2017 and 2021, but just for the capital cities. So while this is largely pre-COVID, and it's got a bit of noise from the COVID period as well, it just helps us understand the age distribution of net interstate migration. As you can see there are some clear flows to some of these cities, especially Sydney, Melbourne, and the ACT. Particularly in the younger cohorts, they are attracted to these cities to take advantage of their educational institutions and their large labor markets. But the demand for these opportunities do come at a cost, like congestion and like high cost of living, particularly housing. And because of this, you do see that the older population cohorts end up leaving the capital cities, whether these be young families or retirees. Most of these people move out of Sydney and Melbourne into regional areas, particularly Queensland. What's most interesting here, though, is the Brisbane, which is the blue line on the left side. You can see positive inflows across all ages. So these would be both the young students, young professionals, and those moving to have a family or a change of lifestyle. And then we've got on the right-hand side, we see strong inflows of young people into the ACT, and this is for the educational sector and the public sector. So overall, the story here is that the big cities pulled in the youth and have a net outflow of families and retirees. Can you get the next slide, please, Sam? So this kind of just shows the reasons why people move in the first place. This is just the Hilda, we call it Hilda data, where they ask people what are the main reasons for moving house, and this is broken down into intra-city and inter-city moves. So for intra-cities, this kind of just means moving within a city or moving between suburbs in the same state. About half of these are primarily driven by housing, presumably to buy a first house, upsizing, downsizing, or for rental reasons. Another main reason for moving intra-city, you can see in the blue segment there would be moving for a relationship. But then when we talk about moving from one city to another city, it's usually a combination, or it's largely a combination of work reasons, education, or family. So that's it for my slides. I will pass on to Chelsea to speak about migration.
Thanks, Elijah. So I wanted to talk through some analysis that the Centre published in the population statement about the changing length of stay of migrants on temporary visas. And this represents an important development in our understanding of departures by those migrants. So how long a temporary migrant stays in Australia varies widely, and it doesn't necessarily match the length of their initial visa. It can depend on why they came, the visa they arrived on, and opportunities to transition to other visas, as well as broader factors like policy settings and economic conditions. The chart here shows the cumulative share of temporary visa arrivals who have departed over time. Each line represents a different arrival cohort. For example, of those who arrived on temporary visas in 2011-12, which is the light green line, around 56% departed after 10 years. What we can see from this chart is that the median length of stay for temporary migrants has been increasing over time. The change in the composition of temporary migration has contributed to this, including an increase in the numbers of temporary graduate visa and bridging visa holders. The trend towards longer stays continued for temporary migrants who arrived in the few years before COVID-19 border restrictions. So for example, cohorts that arrived in 2018-19 initially departed at similar rates to previous cohorts, but then departed at far slower rates from 2020. And this reflects some of the policy settings in place over the COVID period that allowed people to stay in Australia. Importantly, this hasn't reversed, so we're seeing migrants who arrived after the border reopening, which is the light blue line. They're also staying longer, and this adds uncertainty around the timing and scale of departures. I'll move now to talk about dwelling demand as well. So while migration drives population growth, its impact on housing depends on who arrives and how they form households. So dwelling demand differs significantly by age, family structure, citizenship, and visa type, and understanding this can help inform decisions about the appropriate mix of new housing in Australia. Our analysis looks at this by estimating average household representation propensity by citizenship and visa class. So average household representation propensity is the additional demand for dwellings attributable to each person. So if your average household representation propensity is 0.5, that means that each person adds demand of half a house. So on average, Australian citizens, permanent migrants, and New Zealand citizens have similar dwelling demand, while temporary migrants have lower dwelling demand. And these differences reflect different living arrangements. So international students and working holiday makers are more likely to live in group households or non-private dwellings, while permanent migrants and New Zealand citizens are more likely to form couple or family households. Dwelling demand also differs by age. So dwelling demand rises as people enter their late 20s and early 30s and form new households, and it rises again as people move into retirement and tend to live in smaller households, and then eventually falls as people downsize and move into care. Temporary visa holders' dwelling demand is lower than Australian citizens at all ages except for 15 to 24-year-olds. Dwelling demand of temporary migrants peaks much earlier than it does for Australian citizens in their early 50s rather than early 90s. Overall, not all population growth creates the same pressure on housing, and yeah, dwelling demand differs depending on that household formation and composition. Before we move on to questions, I also just wanted to show on the next slide, we have national, state and territory snapshots on our website, which summarize population trends at the state and territory level. And so if you're interested in trends looking at any specific jurisdiction in more detail, definitely recommend looking at these snapshots on population.gov.au. So now I believe we have some time for questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much to the team. There was a lot of information there and I'm sure everyone's still digesting it, but if you have any questions, please feel free to either raise your hand or come off mute and ask a question. Yes, Bron.
Sorry, I can't help myself to be first, but I suppose I just wanted to touch on, and thank you for all that information and all of your work. This is really important work, telling the story of population in Australia. And I just wanted to jump in, I suppose, to say, I know that we've spoken to the centre about sort of this, a bit of a challenge we have, I suppose, with capital city data. And, just noted some of the numbers that you were showing, and obviously for the whole of the capital city, they're absolutely spot on. But when we just go one layer down into sort of those growth areas, the numbers are very different, and the population growth rates are significantly higher. The fertility rates are significantly high, all those sorts of things. And I just wondered, how you think the whole of capital city can influence sort of your colleagues in other portfolios, and how you think we could try and drill down to show the different story across the city. Sorry, it's a hard one to start with.
And I might just ask if you could stop sharing your screen just for the Q&A bit so we can see everyone's faces. Thank you.
I might jump in and grab that question. Yeah, it's a big question. It's one we've certainly grappled with as a centre. It's quite, it's a big ask to go a level down, because every level you go down, you're multiplying what you're looking at. But it's certainly one we've grappled with a lot, and ultimately where we have limited resourcing. That resourcing is only going to become more limited.
I can imagine.
And so the decision we've taken, and we are sort of standing by, is that with the resources we have, it is better for us to focus at a higher level and tell those national stories, which we can then be more confident in, because there's also a trade-off if we go down to a lower level of granularity. Because you're multiplying the number of questions you're asking, your level of certainty drops. And so we've kind of wanted to do, that's kind of how we've prioritized, like focus national, have that high level of certainty, concentrate our limited resources, and then it's open to other organisations to pick up our GCSA forecasts and look at, break those down further. I'd also say that a lot of the drivers at small areas, like they can be a little bit like what's going on now, which is kind of, we've got a slightly longer term focus as well. Like, where are the greenfields now is not where the greenfields are going to be in 2066, and we're just not kind of well placed to look at where will the greenfields be in 2066. And so a lot of that lower level story can also, it's probably a little bit from like local intel, but also you can sort of see some of it in the data now. You can see now where the greenfields are. Like, I absolutely agree. Like, there's very different stories between greenfields and old suburbs. And I could tell you what that story is in general. But yeah, I don't think as a centre we're just well placed to add value at that level.
Okay.
I think Yeong wants to add to my answer.
I was going to say, if Yeong wants to jump in there, is it?
And hi everyone, I'm Yeong. Just Assistant Secretary of the Center for Population. Just wanna just second what Michael has already said. Like, we are a very small branch. We just have like under 20 people doing a lot of forecasts and numbers here. So really, it's all about prioritization and knowing our comparative advantage, and there's a lot of data to be kind of like explored. But like, we've been working with the states and territories, like, and we'll continue to do so. Well, I mean, subject to our resource constraints, but we'll be looking for ways to collaborate with them, and maybe like with a little bit of labor division, like if they can work together with them and they can specialize in other agencies, like they can specialize in doing the more kind of like disaggregated analysis, while in Treasury, like the Center for Population, where we can focus more on the bigger kind of picture and linking our national and state level population projections with the macroeconomic forecast, and just leave it to the experts to do it. But like I just wanted to let you know that we are not working in silos. We are proactively engaging with them, and and we know that we really see the value of doing that. But it's just more about who would be better placed to do it, who would be better resourced to do it. Thanks.
That's music to our ears when you say we're not working in silos. So love that. I'll now throw to Luis, who's got a question.
Hello. Well, thank you very much, guys. It was very insightful, and when you listen something very insightful, you have plenty of questions. I'm going to ask three, and you tell me if you can answer them. One is out of curiosity: what variables are involved that you use to forecast future birth rate? As a person that deals with that, I'm very curious about that. The second one is that when we hear in the media or everywhere the discussion about, and for a country like Australia, that is so reliant on population growth, I always see the conversation dominated by immigration, and why is less focus on organic growth or higher birth rate? And the last one is, I don't know whether you may have seen, and I didn't listen to it, but is there any difference in the birth rate in migrants compared to Australian born? Those were my three ones.
Who's grabbing that? Otherwise, I can jump in.
Michael, you can kind of like take the first half, and I will answer the migration part of that.
Yeah, so I'll touch on the birth rate bits of that. So there's a few different things that we look at in terms of fertility rates, and I would say that if you look at what we did in budget closely, you'll notice it's quite different to what we actually had at POP's statement. So also like what we look at over time changes. I'll just give a fairly it also depends when in the forecast period you're talking about. So one of the things we actually look at is the number of people who are having pregnancy scans. And so that is, it may not surprise you, but being pregnant is a leading indicator of births. Anyway, it took us a while to work this out, but once we discovered this, we were like, does anyone have data on pregnancy scans? And yes, the Medicare system has this information, and so we actually have. So that's just one thing we look at in the very near term. Like we can actually look at what's going to happen in the future. We also we rely a lot on expert advice. So the old forecasts that we talked about in the presentation were based on analysis by Professor Peter McDonald and his modelling of like where we would expect things to go in the long term. We've recently got some new advice from the ANU, which is kind of informing our thinking. We also look at things like sort of what's happened in recent history, in particular like levels of childlessness, or like the proportion of people who go on to have children. And that's actually something that's been quite stable in Australia over time, and that was a big part of the Peter McDonald work, but it's something that we keep a close eye on. And the other sort of thing is like when people are having their kids is something that's very front of mind to us, because sort of when you start having your family affects kind of what your family is going to look like, which affects fertility rates.
Perfect.
On the migrant fertility question, I would refer you, we've got a great chart in our 2024 population statement, which looks at fertility of Australian-born people and migrants. It is different. Also, Australia is different to all other countries on this question as well. Australia is a bit of a unique example. Basically, what happens in Australia in recent history is that because we have such a big temporary migration program, migrant fertility tends to be lower than non-migrant fertility, and that's because people on temporary visas don't tend to have kids. And that kind of makes sense when you think about it, right? You're only here for a year, you're here studying, part of your plan while you're here is probably not to have a child. So yeah, Australia actually is unlike most countries, we have lower migrant fertility than non-migrant fertility.
Thank you.
Thanks. And if I can respond to the policy part of the question, I think like declining fertility rate is a global trend. It's happening everywhere, and kind of like we're not alone. And it's driven by many socio-economic factors, right? Like increasing labor participation and even kind of like cost of living, housing cost. Of course, it's part of that. Also kind of like social norms, a lot of things happening. And I mean, if I can say like, I mean, if you do a little bit of international comparison, probably our policy settings are more pro growth than many other countries. For example, we have the childcare subsidy, and in this budget, the government is doing quite a bit, like just to address some of the housing issues, right? Although I know people may have different views on the effectiveness of those policies, but like you can see, like the government is thinking about that, and we do have like also the family tax benefit, like and a lot of things that is supporting that, but it is declining everywhere. Yeah, and I think in the past we also have done some research, and if we don't have migration, actually our population growth would be really very bad, and we will be aging even more quickly. Yeah. So I mean, we are probably a lucky country because we at least have this policy lever. Yeah, but we need a balance, right? Kind of like our own growth and migration, and we all know that migration will add to both the supply side and demand side of the economy, and a lot of planning will be required. Yeah, and we will just have to get the policy settings right. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Some great questions there, Luis, and some brilliant answers. So thank you. Anyone else have a question that they'd like to ask while we have the team online? And if not, I'd like to take this opportunity again to just thank you to the whole team for your presentation. There's a lot of data in there to digest, but you know, highly encourage everybody to go online and have a look. And is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up, team? No? Well, you're more than welcome to stay online if you'd like, but Yong and team, if you'd like to also go, I know how busy you are, so thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Bron for the rest of our presentation on the federal budget. Bye, team.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks to everyone at Centre for Population too. Good. Okay, let's crack on then. As we heard, as you all know, as you've heard probably too much about, the federal budget was handed down last week, and Parliament is gearing up for a week or two of budget estimates where the government will be grilled over what all of their budget announcements mean and budget commitments mean before it goes back to be put into legislation. And so we had the chance, the NGAA team had the chance to be in Canberra last week and to actually watch the budget being handed down. So that was a bit of a thrill for us. But as you can see, we had a number of meetings. It was just really a positive week to be in Parliament House and to be raising our profile. So there were, I think about 10 formal meetings. There are probably just as many informal meetings. There were coffees with other peak bodies and with journalists. And it was just, I think, a really important time for us to be there and to be able to have a very quick response to what was announced. So I'll run through some of that in a minute, but you can see we met with government and opposition and crossbench, and we really just wanted to be there to provide positive reinforcement where possible, or suggestions for where the opposition and crossbench could perhaps raise some issues over coming weeks. You'll see here we also had a coffee with our former Deputy Chair, Tracy Roberts MP, Member for Peers, so it was very good to see her too. So here's the big picture of what we asked for and what was delivered. So as you know, our advocacy work, it's like a rolling list. And so you also know, and you've all contributed a lot of information and data to our push for housing enabling infrastructure. So our budget submission, our previous research report was really focused on the impact of the Housing Accord target of 1.2 million new homes, as you all know, 26% of which will be built in growth areas, and the impact that was having on the lack of, or the mis-sequencing between enabling infrastructure, so your sewer, power, water, stormwater, all those sorts of things, and the ability of the development industry to actually build. So we went in really hard, and it's probably been 2 years we've been highlighting this. We've contributed to a lot of media stories around the lack of this enabling infrastructure. We've written a lot of letters, we've had meetings with opposition and with government, and I think we can say we had an absolute win in the announcement of a $2 billion local infrastructure fund specifically for housing enabling infrastructure. I'll go into a bit more detail on that in the next slide. So I think we can be really proud that collectively we've helped achieve that. We also went in our budget submission asking for a recommitment and expansion of the Thriving Suburbs and Urban Precincts and Partnerships program. Well, we got halfway there. So the Thriving Suburbs program has been expanded and continued. And there is still a lot of work to do with that program. Sadly, it seems the UPPP was so, as you all know, because you applied for it, as it was so oversubscribed in the last round that the feedback we got from the government is that the intention is to work through what's there and then reassess the program. We also went in our budget submission for a long-term place-based infrastructure fund. We know that is, we're probably only a third of the way through all of the advocacy and conversations before something like that might happen. But while we weren't able to sort of really pursue that in this quite constrained, economically and fiscally constrained environment, there were $8.6 billion of road and rail infrastructure funding for our members. So I think collectively, and as you just heard, we haven't really, we're still evolving our work around a growth areas classification. So that is, again, I think we're in the early days of building that case. But as you can see, overall, I think we could say pretty positive outcomes for growth areas and for NGAA. The devil is always in the detail. So if we look at the local infrastructure fund, $2 billion, and we were given a heads up by Claire O'Neill, the Minister for Housing's office, on the weekend before the budget. I think there were maybe, from what I can gather, maybe 4 or 5 organisations were given this heads up. So I think when you look at who we are and who we represent and how we operate, I think it's really quite amazing that we're up there with some of those very, very powerful, very influential industry groups who also were involved in developing this fund. So we had a briefing with the Minister's advisor, Senior Advisor on Housing, who we had met with, I think, 3 times and had numerous conversations about what a fund like this could be. So it will be delivered through a competitive program akin to the community enabling infrastructure element of the housing support program. So I know a lot of you may have had applications in through that process. The purpose of it is, and constitutionally, it will need to go through state governments, not directly to local government, but the purpose of it is for local governments and state utility providers to be resourced to enable housing to be built. 2 rounds of $1 billion, 25% reserved for regional areas, and some of our members will cross over, so we'll be eligible there. And you know, I think it's really important that the wording talks about infrastructure for new land release. It's definitely about greenfield development. And the Minister's advisors, word for word, this is primed for growth areas. So I think we can say this is an absolute win. However, you know, we now need to make sure that it isn't subsumed by state government processes. And I think there's a really important piece of work to do now, both for us as a secretariat and for you as your individual councils, is to get moving very quickly with working with those state utility bodies to put forward a collaborative case for the investment. So more detail needs to come out about the full process for application. But, you know, when we were talking to the Minister's office, we agree, we came out thinking that the best thing we can do now is continue to collate the information about where the need is for enabling infrastructure. And the best thing we can do is to help our members become well organised to work with their state utilities. I'm sure you all are doing that right now, to be able to lobby the states to say this is the priority. We feel that the wording is geared towards stopping state governments putting this infrastructure fund into their infill in established suburbs, the densification, some of those politically pet projects that different states have. So I think there's a real opportunity there. Of course, it's not enough money. I should have started with that. Of course, you know, it's not enough money, but it is the start. We feel from our secretariat perspective, we can now work with opposition and crossbench through the budget estimates process to sort of point out how we need to lobby for the criteria and for the administration process to be really targeted. So we've sort of talked to a number of opposition shadow ministers and advisors around, you know, who has the actual overview of what's happening with Housing Accord implementation. Is this the moment, we're about halfway through, is this the moment to actually assess where housing is being delivered? Because we know it will show very clearly growth areas are doing the heavy lifting. So we'll keep working on that, and we'll keep just putting in front of them all that evidence that you're providing us of the stalled projects. On community infrastructure, which is, you know, is our other sort of foundation advocacy point, just talked about thriving suburbs, active transport fund, which is a fantastic outcome. We've been working for probably, I would say, 5 or 6 years now with We Ride, who are the cycling peak body around these sorts of programs and funding. So I know we lent a bit of support in this last round to try and get this funding across the line. And then there's also the Stronger Communities program, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is for MP nominated projects. That's all good. However, the work never stops. And so our next steps are to try and raise the profile of this really serious concern our advocacy network is providing us information with. It's around the administration of the grants, particularly Thriving Suburbs, UPPP. So many stories of applications barely acknowledged, no reply 2 years later, of an announcement made of a successful bid, but no contract forthcoming for 12 months, of a really modest request for an extension of the timeline by just a number of weeks, and it's basically just a no, but with no reasoning and only a verbal no. So there seem to be really significant problems within the administration of the grants. And again, this is where we can seek information and provide feedback directly to the department and to the relevant ministers, but also, equip some of that information at a very high level, no specifics, but at a very high level to people who are there to hold the government to account. So we'll be trying all of those angles. I wanted to then just sort of say, those are the key things that our foundations as NGAA advocacy, but these are some of the other issues floating around which will impact both your councils and your communities. And so I just wanted to sort of paint that picture of the ecosystem with which, this whole budget is operating. And, we've heard a lot about the NDIS changes, and we also know from demographic and small business data that our growth areas are home to many, many NDIS suppliers and recipients. So that's going to change things in your community. Going down the left-hand side, the AI Accelerator grants. So we're already doing some work on data centers, and obviously every time we use AI, we need more data centers. So that's going to accelerate that sector as well. We know that the negative gearing, capital gains tax on housing is all going to support new housing. So that is your greenfield development. That's where the new housing will come. On migration, there was a fast tracking of recognition of overseas qualifications, which we know from demographic data is a lot of our communities in growth areas. So that's another element that will really impact your residents. And then the other one, which I've just today booked in a meeting with the Department of Communications to discuss, is around some freeing up or minimising the process really for mobile telecommunications infrastructure providers to have low risk infrastructure approvals. So there was some legislative change proposed there. We need more detail, and the department has said as soon as they're allowed to speak about it, we will be the first ones that they call. So yeah, so that's just a little, I suppose, overview of where we're up to in the budget, what some of those other issues are that we just need to keep an eye on while maintaining our steady focus on those priority projects that you tell us about. So really happy to hear your thoughts on the budget, what you feel that it's going to mean for your communities, and for your councils and priority projects. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Yeah, Louise Puig.
Hi, Brogan, and hi, everyone. This is Luis from City of Armadale here in Western Australia. In relation to the UPPP and the Thriving Suburbs grants or funding, was there any advice given on existing applications? Because here in WA, we put 2 applications on the UPPP, and we were successful at one of them, but one of the major projects is still in the waiting list. So someone just asked me, well, do we now go and apply for Thriving Suburbs, or do we stick to UPPP? Was that mentioned during your conversation?
No, it's a really good question, Lois, and I think a really frustrating position that a lot of councils are in. But what we know at the moment, and it is on our top of our list to pursue more information, is that there's going to need to be a reassessment of the UTPP program, simply because it was so heavily, there's so many more applications than they knew what to do with, that they need to rethink what it's about. So we'll try and seek more information. There will be now a bit of a time lag, not too long, but a bit of a time lag until the new Thriving Suburbs funds are available. But yeah, I think we all need to, we can do that, but I think collectively just keep hassling, because that we need that transparency. Yeah. So sorry, I don't have a firm answer for you there. Anything else? Ellie in Mount Barker.
Hi, Bron. Thanks for the presentation. They've been really, really helpful and really informative. I suppose my question is about the local infrastructure fund and its administration by the state government. I suppose, is there a nexus that you need, in your view? Do you know how that will be prioritised by the federal government and the state governments? Do you need to be on an infrastructure SA list in order to be prioritised? Do you have any oversight on that?
Not at this stage, it's very early, but I would suggest that we do start now in putting forward to, at the political level, the direct connection, for example, in Mount Barker, the water issue, the direct connection between the investment required in housing enabling infrastructure, the utilities, and the number of lots that can be released. So we have that information already. We're ready to start spruiking that to anyone who needs to know it. But I think that's still very much working out some detail of how it will be administered. But I think we need to start now. I think if you, yeah, I'd be talking to your state government as well. I mean, we all know, particularly Mount Barker, the priority there for water, and like it is for wastewater in Southwest Sydney, for example, power in Perth. I think the sooner we keep on talking to at political and bureaucratic level, the more it might be top of mind.
Yeah, thanks, Bron.
Anyone else? No. Louise.
I forgot to say that I'm joining from the city of Playford earlier today. For those ones that don't know it. I'm not very experienced in this, in the budget management, but is there any idea we have about timeframes when they could be open for application? And the other question is, I assume that the application process will be through the federal government, and the work with the state government will be once they are approved eventually.
Yeah, so we were told that it would be, similar to the housing support program, which was directly to the federal government. So we spoke very clearly, like the day we heard about it, about that it can't just be an allocation to states. It needs to be a competitive process. So it will be a competitive process, but it hasn't become clear yet, because it still needs, it still needs to be developed through the budget estimates process. That's our chance to perhaps tweak things, put forward these cases. The final legislation will go through, and then we'll start from next financial year. But yeah, I feel like there's still a lot of work to do for us to try and advocate for, as Ali said, how do we prioritize these things, and yeah, who's actually applying.
Perfect, thank you.
Good. Any other questions? If not, I'll just ask Stephen Gardner and Wallandilly.
Thanks, Bron. Thanks, MJ, and to the whole team. It's not a question, but I think you're about to wrap up. And so what I wanted to do was just to say thank you for your advocacy. I know we've talked a lot in the past that advocacy is very hard to measure. On this occasion, I think there's some pretty clear links for outcomes that have been secured. So, I just want to say thanks to all of our partners there, but also NGAA, because, it's got the bone. I know, as you said, things need to evolve and a bit more work needs to be done, but there's some really good bones there for us to keep working with now. So thank you for all the work.
Thanks, Steve. That's very nice. And, I think if I sometimes reflect on, even 2 budgets ago, none of that terminology wasn't around. The sort of new land releases was not mentioned anywhere in Housing Accord. So I think we've done some really good work together to get our issues into the budget, basically. Yeah.
A growth
Right.
areas analogy, we've paved some roads together, or I don't know,
Yeah.
laid some pipes.
We've laid some pipes. There you go. So I'll wrap up that budget element there, but I just wanted to run through then, and thanks again, Steve, and obviously thanks to all councils, because it is your contributions to our priority project list, to our budget submission, to all the things I'm just about to talk about is what means we can do this work for you. So I just wanted to run through a couple of things that are coming up then. So this is, part of our policy development process, and some of you I know have been involved in these things, but we talked about AI acceleration, and we all know that data centers are a really significant issue, or presence, that's for growth areas. So we've already done one consultation where we had every one of our members present. And we've started developing this sort of guidelines on what's important. We're not putting any value judgment on anything, but we're just trying to play that role of facilitating some strategic thinking and education around all of the different elements that become into a data center consideration. They are really complex things. And, I think it's really important that we try and use our collective experience and knowledge. So we have another webinar coming up next week with the CEO of Data Centres Australia, which is their newly formed peak body. And the goal is, we came out of our first webinar, we all had lots of questions. And so this next webinar will be, ask any question type of thing. We'll circulate some resources that they've provided as well. But we hope from there that we might be able to develop more of a partnership with that peak body, because all the data shows, all the mapping shows growth areas where data centres will be. And we'd love to think we can help you all be equipped. Some of our members, they've already arrived, but others, the process is just starting. So hope we can be of assistance there. The other piece of work we're doing at the moment is on arts and culture. And this is something we haven't dabbled with too much with NGAA in the past, but it's very much about infrastructure, surprise, surprise. But also it's been a really fascinating process to build up our evidence base, not just about access to infrastructure, but also programs and cultural expression and artistic practice in growth areas. You all have fantastic teams, and it's been great to connect with your arts and cultural teams over a couple of workshops that we've had. So really interesting stuff going on in your areas, and thanks for that, but also thanks for your contribution to the submission that we'll finish this week to the National Cultural Policy Review, which goes into, we have to recognise growth areas. We cannot leapfrog, investment in cultural facilities cannot leapfrog from inner city ballet, opera, major galleries through to regional areas and leapfrog over where 22% of the population lives and where the cultural diversity is strongest and where the youngest population is. So we will be putting together, that submission into just a paper, which we will launch on our final day of Congress, which is a site tour out to Bunjil Place in the city of Casey, which is a magnificent civic centre, performing arts centre, gallery and library. And so, yeah, it would be great to be able to launch that paper there. Some other things coming up. We're doing really well with registrations for the members and friends dinner that we're holding during the ALGA National General Assembly. If you haven't registered yet, please do. And this is the start of, I suppose it's a bit of an outreach sort of, let's call it outreach to a broader growth community. So as you know, and we're really thrilled to have Rural City of Murray Bridge as an associate member. Those regional areas where the growth is planned is starting, and we'd love to think that collectively we can be part of helping that to be good growth. And I know Murray Bridge is doing amazing work already in preparing for that. So our members and friends dinner will involve some of those other councils, as well as some of our other industry partners and other peak bodies. So that's going to be fun and quite an informal, collegial sort of evening. So look forward to seeing many of you there. Following that, we have our Emerging Growth Areas Forum, which is the day before Congress officially starts. It's in August. And this will carry on from that sort of members and friends concept. We've invited inner regional, that sort of peri-urban councils from across Australia, as well as a lot of the regional cities, because we have been receiving quite a few requests for meetings with regional cities and regional councils who just want to know how can they access information and knowledge to help them in their growth journey. So we have put together a really great program, and it's all going to be, again, relatively informal. The speakers are our own members, our own experts sharing their stories. And we'll be looking at things like how to get your organisation ready for growth. That can be HR, IT, finance, DCPs. We're going to talk about leading communities through change, especially from an elected member perspective. We're going to talk about how to plan for example, all those kindergartens you're going to need, all the parks. We're going to have a session on working with developers, because there are some fantastic examples across our membership of programs to build good, productive, collaborative relationships with developers. And then we'll have a session around advocacy and, when you can say no and when you have to say yes and all the in-betweens. So the more I've talked to people about it, the more our own members are saying this would be really interesting. Can we come to? And of course you can. So Michelle.
Yeah, no, I was just going to jump on that point in that the Emerging Growth Areas Forum is actually free for all NGAA members, and it and afterwards is our welcome drinks for the Congress. So if you're going to be coming down for the welcome drinks, if you've got the day free, you can attend this forum for free as an NGAA member. You might learn, there's always opportunities to learn as well. So just wanted to make sure that you are aware that it's free for NGAA members.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you. Very good point. And apart from that, I think it will just be really interesting. And obviously, we are looking at it as a bit of a recruitment drive as well. So yeah, love to see you, as many of you there as you'd like to be as well. So then we follow on from that, the wonderful Congress. the competitive advantage of growth areas. Keep an eye on the program development, but the site tour is going to be fantastic, a behind the scenes tour at Melbourne Airport. We're going to be looking at major advanced manufacturing industries in Hume City Council area and Urban Surf, which is a surf park. And that sort of helps us, while the manufacturing helps us look at productivity on our Congress Day on the Thursday. We're going to be talking industrial lands. We're going to be talking, manufacturing, job creation. We're going to be talking about our own people as our competitive advantage as well. So how do we build that sort of social connection and fulfillment with a great dinner after that as well. We'll wrap up then on the Friday with, as I said, the visit to Bunjil Place. So lots to do. If any of you have been to Congress before, you know it's a really lot of fun. And we do make you work hard though, I think sometimes. But please do register and yeah, we'll just keep you updated on speakers as they come through. But it's going to be really exciting. So that's Congress. And then, of course, if you put a placeholder in your calendars, please, for our federal meeting in October in Canberra. So that's it. Any other questions, comments, ideas? No? If not, then I will wrap up by just saying a big thank you to you all for being here, but a particular thank you to Michelle Jack, who is leaving us next week. Michelle's made an enormous contribution to NGAA, and I have really, really enjoyed working with you, Michelle. Very disappointed that Camden Council has poached you, but I know you're going to go into a great role and do a fantastic job there. So thank you for all you've done for NGAA.
Thanks, Bron.
And a warning to everyone else, the organisation is not going to be what it has been. However, we have just opened an expression of interest process for a secondment from amongst our network to fill Michelle's role for 6 months until we have time to sort of have a look at what sort of structure we need going into the future. So I think the link for that's just been put in the chat.
Yeah.
So please circulate that round at your councils. Fantastic opportunity to get quite a different perspective on local government work, and great team to work with. And
It's the best
wonderful
team.
colleagues. So yeah,
It's the best team.
Yeah.
If I can just add, a huge thank you to everybody. It's a very unusual role in that, it is just Bron, Ann and I working as a team, but you are all our extended team, and the support and just it's been an absolute privilege working with you all and learning all about your councils. So I'm just so grateful that I'm not going to be straying too far away from this wonderful community, that I still get to stay in with the network through Camden. And I am just so supportive of anybody that is interested in applying for this role. It has been an absolute privilege. It's been an incredible experience. And so please, absolutely, if you're considering it or if you know someone who's interested, please share the link far and wide, because this is an amazing organisation to work for. It's got a great purpose, and Bron's doing something amazing. So yeah, it's a fantastic time to be part of it.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you at something fairly soon, hopefully. And and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Have a
Thanks
good day.
all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.